This may be a little depressing. Honestly, it's one of my favorite reads of 2022, even though it's a heavy one. It's the book about Stalin. It's called Stalin, the Court of the Red Tsar. It is a very heavy read. First of all, the subject matter, of course. Second, I think it's about like 700 pages. So it took me a few go-arounds to finish this book just because of how long it is, obviously, but also how daunting it would get sometimes. So I had to put it down and revisit it after a little while. Now, the writing itself is wonderful, and as far as biographies go, this is one of the best ones that I've ever read. It's very detailed, and it builds a very thorough picture of Stalin as a dictator, as a father, a husband, a diplomat, a voracious reader, intellectual, and just a tormented person. It really describes every step of his life in so many details that it makes you almost kind of feel bad for him. Like his rough upbringing is described so methodically and with so much empathy that it makes you almost feel bad for the guy. Almost. It is really interesting to try to find somewhat of a common ground with tyrants like that, or at least something that you can relate to, because the magnitude of their wrongdoings is just so massive that it is a serious exercise in empathy. Or maybe not in empathy, but at least in critical thinking. And I think it's somewhat of an essential trait for an actor, because, you cannot judge your characters, they say. Anyway, the whole thing might be more relatable to me because of my background and my family background. For instance, my grandmother's father was actually taken by Stalin's police in the middle of the night, and he was sent to a prison camp where he perished because of some false accusations of him being a spy. The guy was a university professor and a scholar. He spoke many foreign languages, including German, supposedly with no accent, and that was kind of a recipe for disaster if you found yourself in late 40s or 50s in Russia. On a side note, last year I went to Georgia, the country, not the state in the US, and I actually visited the birthplace of Stalin. It's a small town called Gori, even though it wasn't really my initial intention to visit it, but we traveled across the country, my mom and I, and our driver suggested that we stop by this town on our way, and it was definitely a very interesting experience. First of all, it's a quiescent, sleepy little town surrounded by mountains. Absolutely gorgeous, just beautiful nature, some ancient castles and churches here and there. And second, there is still a gigantic freaking museum dedicated to Stalin, including his actual house that he was born and grew up in. And it's a very, very sad, dilapidated looking building. There's also his personal railway carriage, which is armor-plated, of course, and it was used by Stalin from 1941 onwards, including his attendance at the Yalta and the Tehran conferences. And there's almost like this kind of cult of Stalin in that town, which is interesting, to say the least. With all that being put aside, there's absolutely nothing in the environment of that town that could, even in theory, contribute to the creation of such a ruthless and violent person. So it was very interesting to see it with my own eyes. Like, kind of proves it time and time again that it's all in here, and you cannot blame environment for everything. Main takeaway from this book is go to therapy. Go to therapy before it's too late. So why is this book so good? Because it's an absolutely fascinating read, and it is a very, very successful attempt to try and understand such a complex person who affected so many different lives of people all over the world. And most importantly, unlike Hitler, in Russian and Georgian narratives, Stalin still is a very controversial figure in the sense that there is no unanimous agreement on how bad of a person he was. And yeah, mind boggles. Perhaps he has far worse of an image in the eyes of Georgians because he wasn't good for them after all, but in modern Russia, there are still some people, way older people, who grew up with this cult of Stalin, but they still view him as a terrific leader that led their country to the victory in the World War II. And they somehow managed to justify all the atrocities that he was behind. And that just kind of tells you how much some people in Russia value the image of a strong and powerful leader. And back in the USSR, there was a very long period of time when Stalin was glorified. So it definitely affected the way people perceive strong leadership, harsh leadership, and the kind of mindset where you got to do what you got to do, whatever it takes. And some people would justify all the brutalities, and there is very little regard for personal suffering, so to speak. And I think that's primarily why this book is a hard read at times. But anyway, honestly, I cannot recommend it more. It's a fascinating read, especially for those who love biographies, who love history books, and for those who are not that familiar with what was going on behind the closed doors back in the days in the USSR times, and who may want to get a better understanding of psychology of Russians in the current day and age. But anyhow, grab your copy. The link is in the description to this video below. And if you read this book, let me know what you think. And like and subscribe, follow me, and stick around for more.